Do you remember that old McDonald's video game from way back in 2005? You know, one of those weird little flash games we all used to play back when Call of Duty wasn't a huge deal yet and most of us were just sneaking onto our parents' computers for some browser fun? Yeah, if that rings a bell, you're definitely one of the OGs. That game might feel like a distant memory now, but believe it or not, it's been almost 20 years since it first came out. So today we're taking a nostalgic trip back to one of the most bizarre and surprisingly clever games of its time, the McDonald's video game. This was a flash-based game created by an Italian collective called Molle Industria. It technically dropped in late 2005 in Italian, then got a rough English translation and saw a wider release in 2006. But this wasn't just any tycoon-style game. It was actually an anti-adver game, a satirical jab at corporate giants like McDonald's. Some even call it a news game or an editorial game, because it was just as much a critique as it was entertainment. Of course, like many classic Flash games, it eventually got lost in the digital void when Adobe officially killed off Flash at the end of 2020. By early 2021, Flash content was completely blocked, and just like that, an entire era of internet gaming came to an end. So why did Flash die off? Well, it was outdated, full of security holes, drained system resources and didn't work on mobile. Plus, newer tech like HTML5 and WebGL just did everything better. Most browsers like Chrome and Firefox had already started phasing it out long before the plug was officially pulled. But here's the good news. Flash isn't completely dead. Thanks to preservation projects like Flashpoint and Ruffle, a lot of these classic games are still playable today. Some have even been remade in HTML5 or ported to mobile, keeping that old school spirit alive. So let's dive in and take a look at what made the McDonald's video game so unique, so controversial, and honestly, kind of iconic. Once you boot up a new game, you are met with 4 sections you have to keep watch over. These sections are the agricultural section, set in South America, where you buy land to produce soy and keep your livestock, that eventually turns into burgers you sell. The second section is the feedlot, which is where the cattle are sent after they have grown big enough on the pastures. Here they get fed more food to make their meat more fattier and well suited for hamburgers. When the cattle have become fat enough, it will be automatically slaughtered and made into beef patties. These patties are then sent to the third section, which is the fast food chain. Here the burgers are assembled and sold to the customers. The last sections are the headquarters of McDonald's. It's here that you manage the finances and the PR departments of the business. If we head back to the agricultural section, there are a lot we have to consider when playing. When you first start, you will have access to 8 land slots that you can buy and distribute soy production and cattle on. Soy production can be modified by using genetically modified plants. GMSs allows for more use of aggressive pesticides to minimize pest damage, leading to more yield of soy production and more food to be attributed to feed the cattle. The downside of using GMSs is that it can lead to more risk of food poisoning down the line at the cost of the consumer. Above the 8 land slots that are available to buy, we have the city of San Jose. Around the city there are 4 more patches of land that the city uses to grow crops for human consumption. If you for some reason need more land for cattle and or soy production, you can easily acquire this land by slipping the government a small sum of money. The same thing can be said about the rainforest and the village that can be spotted to the right on the screen. These millennia-old forests and the native villages found in them can easily be demolished so that you can grow more soy and raise more cattle to increase the profit margins of your business. For a small sum of money, that is. The problem you might encounter is that you might piss off some anti-globalization movement, but that can be dealt with later. You also have to be careful not to destroy the land that you have cattle on, because the cattle slowly but surely wears out the land that they are feeding on. And if you are not careful, the land can become unusable both for growing soy and for herding cattle, limiting the amount of production you can do in the area. The only way to avoid this from happening is to sell the land for a set amount of time to let it heal back to its original state, for then again to acquire it and using it either for soy or cattle production. When you have set up a good agricultural infrastructure, then it's time to harvest what you sow. After a year in the pastures, the cattle will be sent to the feedlot, where the cattleman will ensure that everything is running smoothly. As long as you have significant with soy production, everything should be alright. But there might be cases where some cows might get sick because because of the unhealthy food. To not risk an epidemic, the best thing you can do is to eliminate the problem as quickly and humanely as possible. If you aren't quick enough to rectify this, then the sick cattle might accidentally get brought to the slaughter-o-matic to then be chosen to identify as a meat patty instead of cattle. But don't worry, it's not a big deal, at least not yet. When the cattle gets turned into red meat, there are a lot of organic material that is left over from the process. This material can in a crisis be turned into animal flour and mixed into the fodder to make sure that the cows get the nutrition they need. But then again, this might lead to some of the cattle developing BSE, or better known as mad cow disease, which can then lead to somewhat of a scandal if the press gets news about it, which isn't really good for the business. Another solution to the lack of fodder for the cattle can be to add industrial waste and oils, sewage and other byproducts to the food. It isn't necessarily good for the cattle, but it will ensure more patties to sell to the customers, and they are cheaper than buying more land for soy production. If you're in a hurry to make the cattle fat enough to slaughter, you also have the option to add hormones to the food to fatten them more quickly. But this could have some risks to consumer health, but make no mistakes, in love and war everything is allowed. After being slaughtered and turned into patties, the meat is then transported to the restaurant. Here you have to hire one or more grillmen to assemble and ready the meal for the customers. These guys then send the prepared meal to the cashier, who then have the great pleasure to sell this glorious meal to the working people of the world. There is also a manager present who will alert you if there are any problems in the fast food section. If there are no more patties and the crew can't create meal, he will notify you. And more importantly, if any of the employees are slacking or showing signs of poor workmanship, you will either have the opportunity to reward the employee with a badge or discipline the employee. And if this doesn't work in fixing the problem, then you will have to eliminate the problem by firing them and then hiring a new employee. But be careful not to fire too many employees at one time, because this could lead employees to unionize, which isn't a good thing. The last section is the headquarters. McDonald's is not just a fast food chain after all, but it's a well-recognized brand. It is here that you make the most strategic decisions about the corporate image amongst the people. You will have 3 elements to keep track of in the headquarters. The first is the marketing section. This section is in charge of the marketing techniques that the company currently is using to attract more customers to the business. These techniques vary from pushing the message that McDonald's meals are rich in important fats and proteins, and crucial substances that help with production of antibodies, bone health and memory. Another marketing technique is that we are targeting children, because they have a fresh mind that are free from critical thinking, and since they are prone to early indoctrination, it makes them the perfect subject for marketing, which again helps drive their parents' consumption habits, making more money for us. Then you have the PR office, which is in charge of dealing with PR things. In other words, bribing politicians, climatologists, health officials and nutritionists in an effort to combat cases of damages to the environment, sudden food poisoning amongst the customers, or disproving the correlation between obesity and fast food. In other words, they are in charge of keeping us from being sued. The last and the most important part of the business is the board of directors. These people invested their capital into the business, and they oversee the activities within the company to make sure you don't run it into the ground. If you anger them enough or lose enough money, they will fire you. Here you can also keep a track of income and expenses and see how the company are doing financially. In short, you want this line to go up and not downwards. And if you can manage that and keep the money within the company, then you can basically do anything you want and don't worry too much about protesters, lawsuits and other minor inconveniences. And that is the gameplay in short. All in all, the McDonald's video game is a surprisingly intricate experience. What might initially seem like a simple satirical flash game actually reveals a fairly complex simulation beneath the surface. Managing supply chains, balancing profits against ethics, dealing with environmental degradation, public image and even labor issues. It all comes together in a way that mirrors real-world corporate challenges, albeit through an exaggerated lens. That's part of what makes the game so clever. Its satirical approach isn't just for laughs, it's a pointed critique of corporate practices, particularly within the fast food industry. And while it exaggerates for effect, the issues it highlights, deforestation, exploitation, marketing ethics, lobbying, are all grounded in real conversations that will remain relevant today. What's most impressive is how the game delivers all of this without sacrificing playability. It's engaging, it's strategic, and whether or not you agree with its message, it presents its ideas in a way that invites you to think critically while still offering a solid gameplay loop. These elements flew way over my head when I played this game when I was 7 or 8 years old, and this also led to me to lose every time I tried to play the game, since I didn't understand the mechanics behind my choices. Now, as an adult, I find the game really fun to both play and to see deeper into the more satirical aspects of it. Even nearly 20 years later, the McDonald's video game stands out not only as a nostalgic relic from the Flash era, but also as an example of how games can be used as powerful tools for commentary and education. While still being genuinely fun to play, the game even becomes so popular that McDonald's released a statement distancing itself from it, stating that the game has no association with McDonald's and is therefore a complete misrepresentation of people and our values. This actually led to legal issues related to intellectual property, so Molle Industria actually released an alternate version of the game titled Burger Tycoon on some platforms like Congregate. This version is identical in gameplay but removes all direct references to McDonald's, replacing the franchise branding and mascot with generic counterparts, such as a bear in place of Ronald McDonald. The game can still be found on Molle Industria's website, and it can be played inside the browser or be downloaded as a flash game, which is totally awesome. So if you want a trip back down memory lane, then I suggest you jump back into the game because it is still as awesome as it was 20 years ago. The link to the game will be down in the description below. What do you think about the game? Do you remember playing it, and did you manage to keep the business alive back then? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content like this. You could also mention a forgotten game down below and maybe I'll look into it in a later video. I want to say thanks for watching, and hopefully I see you in the next one. Goodbye.